On Saturday, President Donald Trump signed an executive order designating Antifa, short for anti-fascist, as a domestic terrorist organization, citing its supposed armed standoffs with law enforcement and organized riots. There are a number of problems with this. The first is that Antifa is not a cohesive organization, but rather a loose, leaderless ideology that brings together various individuals and groups under the banner of opposing fascism. Then there's the fact that US law allows only foreign groups to be designated as terrorist organizations. The order also threatens the prosecution of those who finance Antifa, hinting at how the administration might target progressive megadonors such as George Soros, whom Trump accused, without evidence, of funding violence following the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Trump also said that he was authorizing so-called Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. Trump authorized the use of full force, if necessary, for the deployment. Portland thus joins the ranks of American cities that Trump has either sent or plans to send troops to, a list that includes Washington, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Memphis. We are the Frank and Honest YouTube channel. Subscribe if you would like to be informed when we drop more videos. This is a new channel with more content coming soon. Trump is using the specter of Antifa as an ideological rationalization for his crackdown on domestic political opponents. The New York Times reported that there are major factual and legal challenges to any government effort to formally designate Antifa a terrorist group in any substantive way. One problem is that Antifa is not really an organization, but, as the Times accurately notes, a label for a political subculture or protest style. The phenomenon does not have a leader, an initiation process, membership roles, a headquarters, a bank account, or a centralized structure. And even if Antifa were an actual institution, there are no legal provisions for designating a domestic group as a terrorist organization. Legally, the terrorist designation applies only to foreign groups. The Justice Department last week quietly removed a study online that showed far-right extremists commit far more fatal violence than those on the far left. And the White House's mass deportation campaign has reportedly diverted FBI agents from monitoring and prosecuting far-right groups. It seems the Trump administration's real problem isn't so much the scourge of political violence, but who gets to commit it. Antifa, as used by Trump and his cronies, is a myth. Fact-checking a myth is never a fully adequate response, since it doesn't address the emotional appeal the myth serves. It should be noted that the individuals who identify as Antifa have not been out in the street so much in recent years and are certainly not being funded by billionaires like George Soros. Rather, Trump uses Antifa as a boogeyman catch-all category for all sorts of tendencies the right opposes. Black Lives Matter, trans rights, and immigrant rights have all been lumped in with Antifa and terrorism. The Soros fiction has overtones of the Nazi myth of Judeo-Bolshevism, made popular in Germany during the 1930s. Back then, the Nazis concocted the fantasy that wealthy Jews were subverting German society by financing revolution, an ideological chimera that allowed the Nazis to pose as opponents of both unpopular plutocrats and scary plebeians. The myth of Soros-funded Antifa might serve a similar function for Trumpism, uniting the populist and law and order factions of the right. The Antifa myth is elastic enough to encompass the broad sweep of opposition to Trump, liberals as well as radicals. The National Security Directive signed by Trump has far-reaching implications. Modeled after the George Bush administration's war on terror approach to groups such as Al-Qaeda, the directive authorizes law enforcement to preemptively disrupt groups that might be a threat. The indicators of violence in the report are alarmingly broad and include these ideas, some of which are held by groups that may not align themselves with any terrorist agenda: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on morality. The Trump administration seems intent on using these new directives to attack the free speech rights of its critics. On Wednesday, Stephen Miller tweeted, "This language incites violence and terrorism," in response to California Governor Gavin Newsom's criticism of ICE and the Trump administration as authoritarian. The Antifa myth is a wedge that Trump will use to destroy free speech. It's not enough to simply point out that it's a myth. Rather, Democrats need to rally Americans with the argument that the threat to Antifa will one day be used against anyone who speaks out against Trump. The American people also need to understand that being anti-fascist is not such a bad thing, in light of how one previous generation of Americans successfully conquered fascism, occurring overseas 77 years ago, during World War II. This video is a testimony to the courageous hard work and sacrifice to those who fought in that conflict and the example of true patriotism it showed us.